Katharine Hepburn didn't become an icon by being loved. She became one by being unbreakable. And that sounds heroic until you ask the obvious question. What does it cost a woman to become unbreakable in a business designed to break women into shapes men prefer? Because late in life, there's a moment that cuts through the legend. A meeting with director John Ford, one of Hollywood's most powerful men and one of its most self-destructive. A recorder is supposed to be off, but it keeps rolling. And in that private space, with the cameras gone and the performance over, Ford tells her he loves her. And Hepburn, the woman who made an entire career out of not needing anyone, answers back. It's quiet, it's intimate, it's almost teenage. And it raises the question her whole life was built to avoid. If she was so free, why does every real feeling in her story happen in secret? That's the price, not a twisted double life. A bill, a long bill. And it starts way before Hollywood. It starts in a house that was progressive on paper and ruthless in practice. Hepburn was born into a family that didn't raise daughters to be decorative. Her mother was a suffrage activist who dragged her kids into the real world. Marches, meetings, women speaking like they deserved to be heard. Her father was a doctor who talked about sex and disease in a way polite society hated because he thought shame was killing people. So you'd think that kind of home builds a girl who's safe. But what it really builds is a girl who's different. And being different is only fun until the world notices. Young Katharine hated being treated like a girl. She didn't just resist it, she rejected it. She chopped her hair, wore the wrong clothes, played the wrong games, and at times insisted on being called Jimmy. Not because it was cute, because Jimmy came with freedom. And she grew up with something most women in her era never got. Permission. Permission to be loud, to be sharp, to take up space. That permission made her strong. It also made her a target. And then, at 13, she learns the lesson that rewrites everything. Death doesn't just take people, it rewrites families. She and her brother Tom go on a trip to New York. Easter breaks, aunts, theater, the kind of normal memory you'd expect in a privileged family. And then she finds him dead. 15 years old. And the family refuses the word suicide. They don't want that stain. They want an explanation that doesn't shame them. So they deny, they rename, they smooth it into something survivable. But a child doesn't survive a moment like that cleanly. You don't wake up the same after you find someone you love like that, especially when the adults around you teach you that the truth itself is unacceptable. This is the first major cost Hepburn pays. She learns that reality is negotiable if you have the right last name, that you can bury pain under a respectable story, that the family will protect its image even when the image becomes a prison. And the strangest part is what she does next. For years, she stops celebrating her own birthday. She abandons it, and she takes her brother's birthday, November 8, and uses it as hers. That's not a quirky fun fact. That's grief turned into identity theft. A girl trying to drag someone back into the world by wearing his date like a mask. A girl quietly deciding, if he can't exist, maybe I shouldn't either. And once you start editing yourself to survive, you don't stop at birthdays. You do it with everything. Her grief hardens into a style. She becomes more anxious, more guarded, more suspicious of the world. But she also becomes something else. Brutally independent. Because if life can pull your brother out of your arms overnight, you start treating attachment like a liability. And that's the contradiction that defines her. She's raised by progressive parents who can tell her she can be anything. Then she sits with a trauma that teaches her being anything has consequences. And here's where most biographies get lazy. they treat Hepburn's toughness like personality, like she was born with it. No, it was built. One part upbringing, one part pain. And then she goes to college and does what she always does when the world tries to shape her. She refuses. Brian Maher teaches her discipline, but it also gives her a stage. And once Hepburn finds the stage, something clicks. Acting isn't just attention, it's control. On stage, you decide what people see. You decide when they clap. You decide when they feel. For someone who grew up watching adults deny the truths, that kind of control is intoxicating. So she commits to it, and she immediately starts paying. Early theater is humiliating, brutal, public. She's awkward, sharp-voiced, too strange, not the soft, shimmering thing audiences are trained to want in women. She gets fired. She bombs. She trips. She forgets lines. One critic later said her emotions ran from A to B. People quote it like a joke, but imagine reading that about yourself when you're fighting to exist. Hepburn doesn't quit. She does something more dangerous. She decides she'll outstubborn the world. She marries Ludlow Ogden Smith because that's what a young woman is supposed to do when she's floating in uncertainty. And it lasts on paper longer than it lasts emotionally. Because Hepburn wasn't built to be someone's wife in the domestic sense. She wanted her own gravity, and she uses her husband like a bridge. He finances her, supports her, waits for her to settle. She doesn't. Not because she's evil, because she's hungry, and hungry people will use love like fuel. Then Hollywood notices her. RKO signs her, and in a single swing, she goes from struggling actress to screen presence. She demands a salary that makes executives choke. She lands a bill of divorcement, then Morning Glory, then an Oscar. And you think this is the part where the fairy tale starts. But Hepburn's fairy tale comes with a clause. The clause is, be grateful, be charming, be accessible, be feminine in the exact way the public wants. And Hepburn refuses. She hates interviews, she hates autograph lines, she hates being treated like a doll with a voice. She wears pants when women are supposed to wear skirts. And when the studio tries to correct her, they do the most petty, revealing thing imaginable. They confiscate her pants, so she walks around the lot in her underwear until they give them back. It's funny until you realize what's happening. A grown industry trying to discipline a woman like she's a misbehaving child. And Hepburn's message is simple. I will not be corrected. The press does what it always does to women who won't perform softness. They punish her. They call her arrogant. They call her cold. They take her independence and translate it into a flaw. They even give her a nickname, Katharine of Arrogance. That's not a critic of acting. That's social discipline. A reminder that a woman can only be powerful if she's also pleasing. And Hepburn, stubborn as hell, makes the worst possible move for her reputation. She starts falling for men who are already claimed, not because she's desperate, because those men come with a built-in excuse. If the relationship is impossible, she never has to fully surrender. First, there's the affair with Agent Leland Hayward. Then there's John Ford. And Ford is the wrong kind of man to love. A legendary director, a national myth, also a heavy drinker, emotionally volatile, and, in some accounts, dangerously self-destructive. They work together on Mary of Scotland, and Ford becomes obsessed with her. He sees the tomboy thing and reads it as purity. He sees her backbone and reads it as salvation. And here's the trap in that kind of romance. When a damaged man calls you different, what he often means is useful. Useful as a calm center. Useful as a mirror that doesn't judge. Useful as a woman who can carry his mess without collapsing. Hepburn keeps getting pulled toward men who are brilliant and broken. And she keeps taking the role she pretends she doesn't want. The fixer. The anchor. The woman who can stand next to a collapsing man and make it look like love instead of a rescue mission. This is another cost. Because being the strong woman is flattering until you realize it's also a trap. It attracts people who want your strength as a service. And while her private life is getting complicated, Hollywood starts turning on her professionally too. A string of flops, a public that decides they're tired of her, a studio system that loves you until you stop being profitable. She goes for roles she thinks will save her and gets told no in the most humiliating language possible. Not sensual enough, not the right kind of woman. And when Gone with the Wind is casting, she wants Scarlett. She gets rejected. Because even her talent can't outrun the fact that Hollywood still wants women in a narrow lane. By 1938, she's labeled box office poison. The list wasn't a rumor, it was a literal industry label. And if you're an actress in that era, that label is a death sentence. No offers, no respect, no mercy. This is the point where most people fold. Hepburn doesn't fold. She does something almost nobody in her position could do. She buys her freedom. She pays to get out of her studio contract. She walks away from Hollywood. And she goes back to the stage, not because she's humbled, but because she's plotting. Because when Hollywood tells a man you're done, he reinvents. When it tells a woman, it expects her to disappear. Hepburn refuses to disappear, so she builds her comeback like a heist. She takes the Philadelphia story on Broadway and turns it into a weapon. She secures the film rights. She makes herself the product. Then she sells the rights to a major studio with conditions that give her power. Not please cast me, I'm the lead. And she stacks the deck with Cary Grant and James Stewart. She basically forces America to like her again. That's not luck, that's tragedy. And it works. The Philadelphia story hits, and suddenly she's not poison. She's brilliance. She's the woman who saved herself. Hollywood loves a comeback story, especially when it can pretend it supported you the whole time. But even in victory, Hepburn keeps paying. Because while she's fighting studios and rewriting contracts, she's also living under a microscope. Her clothes, her voice, her body, her refusal to be sexy on demand. She's mocked for being boyish. She's speculated about. Her sexuality becomes public property. And it doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what it costs to have strangers debate your identity like it's entertainment. Then she meets Howard Hughes. And Hughes is another version of the same pattern. Powerful, obsessive, eccentric, controlling. A man who loves her because she doesn't bend, and then resents her because she doesn't bend. He floods her life with airplanes and yachts and money. He tries to cage her with luxury. And Hepburn treats it like a test. Because she's not looking for comfort, she's looking for respect. And when he can't handle her world, her family, her independence, she moves on. This is the surface story people celebrate. Hepburn, the woman who won't be owned. But here's the part people ignore. Every time she refuses to be owned, she also refuses to be fully held. She keeps choosing relationships that can't become simple, because simple would require softness, and softness is the one thing she learned was dangerous. Then comes a relationship that cements the myth. Spencer Tracy, the great tortured man. They meet professionally, they connect immediately, and the studio machine goes into panic mode because Tracy is married. So the affair becomes an open secret and a closed story. Everyone knows, no one says it. Hepburn's public image becomes independent, about romance. Meanwhile, she's living in a relationship that will define her privately, and she cannot claim it publicly. This is one of the sharpest costs of her life. Not because she needed marriage, because she needed truth, and she can't have it. Tracy is Catholic, guilty, struggling. He drinks, he spirals, he disappears into hotels and rented apartments. And Hepburn becomes, once again, the strong one, the nurse, the protector, the woman who shows up when everyone else is exhausted. She rearranges her life around his darkness. And if you want the cost angle in one sentence, it's this. Hepburn built a career proving she didn't need anyone, then spent decades living like someone's private lifeline. She steps away from acting for long stretches to care for him. She manages his moods, his health, his shame, and she does it quietly, because the world would rather call her a legend than admit she was trapped in a secret. People romanticize it as the love of her life, and sure, there was love. But love doesn't erase the math. Decades of care, decades of hiding, decades of being the unofficial spouse with none of the rights. And if that's romantic, it's also brutal. And while she's paying that bill, she keeps working. She wins more Oscars. She doesn't show up to accept them. She lets the statue sit somewhere else while she keeps moving, because she refuses to play the gratitude game. She keeps her name alive in an industry that ages women out like expired fruit. She becomes the exception, the rule breaker, the proof that talent survives sexism. But the proof comes with a footnote. She survives because she's willing to be harder than everyone expects. And being that hard does something to a person. It turns emotion into private property. It turns grief into a schedule. It turns intimacy into a controlled environment. When Tracy's health collapses, she's there. When they film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, it's not just a movie. It's a goodbye with cameras. Tracy dies days after filming Wraps. Hepburn doesn't attend his funeral. She stays away out of respect for his wife, for his family, for the public story everyone needs to remain intact. And imagine what that takes, to lose the person you spent decades orbiting, and to not be allowed to publicly grieve, to be the love of his life and still have to behave like you were nothing. That's not just sadness, that's erasure. And Hepburn accepts it, because she's been trained to accept it since she was 13. Truth is optional. Image is everything. Years later, after Tracy's wife dies, Hepburn finally speaks more openly. And even then, she never sells it like a romance novel. She speaks like someone describing a commitment, a duty, a thing she chose and lived with. And then, in late life, she starts loosening the grip. She does long interviews. She laughs more. She lets the public see that behind the famous voice and the pants and the spine, there was an actual person. But she still keeps her secrets. She kept a lie about her birthday for decades. She kept her grief private. She kept her love private. And the world, as always, keeps trying to reduce her. Was she straight? Was she gay? Was Tracy gay? Was it all cover? People ask because they want a label that makes them feel smart. But the deeper truth is simpler and uglier. In Hepburn's era, any woman who refused to be packaged as wife or sex symbol got treated like a mystery that needed solving. Even her autonomy was suspicious. And just to make the bill thicker, she never stopped provoking the era she lived in. She spoke openly in favor of birth control and abortion rights when nice actresses were expected to smile and dodge the question. She called herself an atheist in town where public faith was part of the performance. She kept wearing pants, kept talking like a man, kept refusing to be softened for anyone's comfort. Every one of those choices made her more legendary. Every one of those choices also made her more alone. Because when you make a career out of being the exception, you don't get to blend in. You don't get to disappear into normal love, normal grief, normal life. You become a symbol. And symbols don't get privacy. So when Ford is near the end, and that recorder keeps rolling, and you catch the small human moment that wasn't meant for you, it hits harder than any scandal headline ever could. Not because it's shocking, because it's proof that beneath all the armor, she was still paying for the same thing she'd been paying for since she was 13. The right to be seen without being owned. And then we circle back to that tape, the one that keeps rolling, because that tape matters even if you never hear it. It's a crack in the icon. It proves that under the posture of "I don't need anyone," There was still a woman who loved men who couldn't be saved, men she couldn't claim, and men who took pieces of her strength like it was free. And somehow, she still became Katharine Hepburn. 4 Oscars, a career that outlived trends, a public image so strong it became a kind of armor for other women. But armor has a downside. It keeps out what hurts you. It also keeps out what heals you. Hepburn's life isn't just an inspirational story about a woman who made it. It's a story about what she traded to make it. She traded softness for survival. She traded privacy for power. She traded the right to be openly human for the right to be taken seriously. And if that sounds dramatic, it's because it is. Because the real scandal in Hepburn's story isn't who she slept with. It's what she had to become in order to stay standing. She lived to 96. She died in 2003 in the place she loved. After years where her body finally did what Hollywood never could, force her to slow down. And the last irony is that she knew exactly what she was doing. She kept playing tennis into old age like she was daring time to take her. She painted, she worked, she stayed in the home she loved. And when she finally declined, it wasn't in the spotlight. It was quiet, private, controlled. Because even at the end, Hepburn didn't let the world see her fall. That's the final cost. A woman so famous for being free that she spent her whole life paying to keep the illusion intact. If you want the real Hepburn story, it's not icon and contradiction. It's a receipt. And the total is higher than anyone wants to admit. If you want more stories where the legend is the mask and the real damage is what built it, subscribe. Because Hollywood doesn't create icons, it creates survivors who learn to bleed in private.